What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? You already know what time it is. You're in the Birdcage with your boy, the historian Ryan Walker. We have an icon joining us tonight. But before we bring this icon to the stage, go ahead and hit that like and that subscribe button for us so we can go ahead and make sure that you guys enjoy the show. But we want to make sure we get these likes so we can keep bringing you the funk that we do here in the Birdcage, baby. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and we getting ready to get this thing started. It's the Birdcage. You either get right or you get left. Let's go.
Okay, y'all, this is it.
Y'all didn't expect that one. I had to come out the bag tonight for y'all. We got the best in the building tonight. One of the best reporters that covered the Atlanta Falcons next to Mr. Furman Bishop. Rest in peace to one of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution legends who I also read and got up on. But before we bring the special guest into the building, I got to go ahead and bring the magnificent Birdcage crew into the building tonight. So we have Coach Cam in the building, and we have Gray Beard in the building, the salt and pepper man. What's going on, fellas?
Oh man, what is going on with you, Victoria? Hey man, first and foremost, I want to shout out to everybody. Thank y'all for stopping by to the Birdcage. Please make sure y'all hit that like button. I'm telling you, man, we got a burner with us on the Perch, man. I'm totally excited about that guest that we have, man. So let's go ahead. Coach Cam, how you feeling, big homie?
Hey, what's going on, Birdcage family? Just happy to be back home with my guys. Miss you guys for the last couple of weeks dealing with some family issues. But it's gonna be a great show. So again, like my brothers have already said, like and subscribe. We got a great show for you guys. Let's get to it.
Man, I'm glad to have you back, man. I understand that struggle. I dealt with that last year. So, my prayers out to you and your family. But thank you for coming in, bro. We love you, and we appreciate you taking time away from your schedule to come in. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we have coming into the Birdcage for the first time. We have the legendary, the icon himself, Mr. Steve Wyche. Welcome into the cage, Mr. Wyche.
Let's go. Let's go. Hey, look, fellas, Ryan's the only one that done got some of this on his head, but the shirt though, Ryan, that's what I'm talking about, bro.
Well, you know what? I got to show you a little bit of love because, my great-grandfather went to Howard University back in the day, pledged Omega Psi Phi, when the founding fathers were around in Thrinkett Hall. I know a little bit about their history. But, I'm not just going to rock that shirt. Building, baby. Put some respect on it. I'm sorry, dog. I got I'm not going to go into the building without that Jaguar, baby.
I feel you, man. Look, HBCUs, we stand taller together, so it's nothing but love.
Yes, and the beautiful thing about what you do for the HBCUs, and I've pointed it out on the show many a times, and one thing we do here in the Birdcage, I personally take it upon myself to always point out players that come out of the HBCUs, and sadly they get overlooked a lot of the time. And to me, I'm just gonna be honest with you, there are a ton of guys that are better than some of these guys in these PWIs. Just that's just my opinion. I understand how it goes. I'm a diehard Georgia Bulldog fan, but as I said before any of these schools got the talent that you see in the SEC, the Big Ten, in these places, remember, they were either in the Ivy Leagues or they were in the HBCU ranks. And the HBCUs look exactly like the SEC used to back in the day. So we've had a couple of legendary HBCU coaches that you might know. Legendary coach, Mr. William Hayes, better known as Wild Bill, Winston-Salem State.
Yeah.
We also had Dr. Joe Taylor, Hampton University in here, 5-time national champ. And track and field, we had the legendary, he's like a godfather to me, Mr. George Williams.
No, I love it, man. I mean, just that's excellent that you're representing, you're talking about the HBCUs, and and I don't want this to come off negative in any way, because we're always talking about the history of HBCUs, but the future of HBCUs is really where it is. I mean,
yes, sir.
There's going to be some kids coming out of this year's, if they don't get drafted, who are going to make teams as undrafted free agents. This new kickoff rule is going to give a lot of HBCU kids life, right? Where returners are going to be absolutely vital. There are coaches now coming through the pipeline that are from HBCU programs that are getting into the league. So, again, the history of the shoulders that we stand on the Doug Williams, on the Jackie Slaters, on the Deacon Jones, right? We stand on those shoulders. Well, let's also continue to uplift these young fellas and these coaches that are putting in the grind right now, trying to fight the battle of the bias to get into the NFL.
But when you have somebody like this right here to get on the Wheaties box, the greatest running back of all time, my idol, you can't sit there and say that greatness doesn't come out of there, because Jerry Rice, 20 years in the NFL, to put up the numbers that he put up and to do what he did, it was sad that his teammate Willie Totten didn't get an opportunity to play in the NFL, even though he played in Canada. But I think he literally would have lit up the NFL. That's just my opinion. But we gonna get to this interview. So we definitely appreciate you for coming through tonight, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. I'm glad you asked.
Now on this panel, it's a lot of us, myself and my guys here. There, you got 2 Army vets and you got a Coast Guard veteran on here. So I saw and read a little bit about your dad, Air Force veteran.
Yep.
Shout out to the United States Air Force out there, whatnot, for my Air Force vets that are in here tonight. One of the things that we look at is a lot of people end up becoming military brats. So when your dad was in the service, were you a military brat? And when you got to be in the situation where you started playing football at a young age or whatnot, what gravitated you towards that, or was your dad out by the time you started playing football and everything?
Yeah, I was not a military brat. My father just did 1 term of service. He's from Hampton, Virginia. Did only 1 term of service, came back and went to Hampton Institute, where he met my mother. They're both Hampton Institute graduates. And then from there, my parents moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I was born. My brother and I were born in Minneapolis. So I spent the first 9 years in Minneapolis. And then when we moved to St. Louis. And that's when I was old enough to start getting involved in youth sports. Started out playing baseball, then football, everything you do as a kid. And then we got into high school. I was kind of bigger than a lot of other people. And I was a quarterback for a long time. And that's where things started. In my junior year of high school, I started a quarterback, and we changed the system because I was a little bit different than the guys that they had there before. But they won. And with me back there, they lost. So they had to move me to a different position. They had to move me to the edge. Things worked out right there. So I spent a couple of years at the University of Missouri riding the bench there before I transferred to Howard.
Yeah, and you were a Mizzou Tiger, so you got a little bit of SEC in you, and you got some
Big Eight, man. I can't claim SEC. Big 8.
Well, I'm sorry, you played in the Big 8, but now you guys are in the SEC, so y'all are family, regardless of how you look at it. It's just like a marriage. Just think about it. You have
I ain't claiming third cousins.
Hey, I bet money if they win a national championship, you'll claim it then.
Oh, hell yeah.
Hey,
I'll be on that bandwagon with a heartbeat.
He'll be chanting SEC.
I still keep in touch with all my old teammates, which is great. You know, they like to see what I'm doing. They're proud of me, and I love those guys, man. We went through an awful lot. Went through a coaching change. So like these are all things though that I incorporate into my reporting, right? I've been through a coaching change, a new staff coming in and say, yeah, you know, you're not really one of our guys, so we'll help you get out, right? So when a new coach comes into a program, I understand when guys don't fit their scheme or don't fit their ideology or just not their cup of tea, right? So I understand that because I've been through it. So I've seen guys get hurt. I've seen, you know, guys have private issues. So all those things I experienced way back in the day, and you know, it's really helped me get people to have conversations and give me information that they're just not giving the other people.
Mm-hmm. So, and the question I got for you, because I'm gonna open this up to my guys. Now we were talking about you moving to St. Louis. You grew up during the time of the St. Louis Cardinals, O.J. Anderson, and those guys out there. Jim Hart, yep, Eric Metcalf. And then when you look at it and you look at how that city has went through changes of teams or whatnot, you've gone through changes yourself just like that. You went from a Big 8 school to an HBCU. And when you look at what's going on right now with the Falcons turnover, I'm gonna get to the Falcons, but I want to talk about you. And what was the change like for you going from a regular institution to you going to Chocolate City when it was Chocolate City before gentrification kind of spread everything out? You were there during the time where John Thompson was still running the city back in the day. Joe Gibbs' offense was literally still lethal at that time. What was it like for you coming from the Missouri area to come into a vibrant city of Washington, D.C., where you had Black sophisticated individuals, aristocrats is what we would say at that time, and you saw them making a way for themselves, and not just making a way for themselves, making a future for the generations that come afterwards. And you having gone through the program at Howard University of Communications, class of 89, by the way. I read your profile. What was it like with that transition and learning how to adapt to being in a city like that and getting into that field of journalism that you're in right now?
Well, I mean, it's a lot. It's like a lot of kids who go to HBCUs who grew up in the suburbs, right? Where I went to high school in St. Louis. You know, my graduating class, I think there were like 6 or 7 Black kids out of like 360. And, you know, so, and then when I went to University of Missouri, you had a school with about 25,000 students with less than 1,000 Black students. So, you know, I'd never really grown up around a lot of Black people. I'd never really been incorporated into Black culture. Now, when I was on the football team in Missouri, you know, the teammates, the cats you rolled with, you know, were the brothers on the team. So when I went to transfer to Howard, because, you know, like I said, my mother, she was at Hampton Institute. She was like, why don't you go to a Black school? Like when I was getting recruited, I didn't get one letter from an HBCU, right? They didn't have recruiting budgets, right? Especially to come to a place like St. Louis, whatnot. So I was like, I'm not getting recruited by any of these guys. So then when I decided to transfer, there was a girl ahead of me from my high school, one of the few Black kids who called me and said, oh, Steve Howard is the best. A girl named Toya Watts, rest in peace. Steve Howard is one of the best things. You'd love it. It'd be such a good thing for you. So when it came time to transfer, I applied to Hampton and Howard, and I knew Willie Jeffries because he had recruited me when he was at Wichita State. Mm-hmm. So, you know, he saw I was interested in coming. Transfer rules were very different then, so I ended up not playing football. But, you know, when I got to D.C., remember now, this was 1986. You talked about all the aristocrats and the Black legacy. It was Black gangsters, right? Yep. This is when Len Bias had just died. Mm-hmm. Crack was just coming into the mainstream. So all the gangs and stuff from New York were coming out of D.C. because the block was hot up in New York. So D.C. was a murder capital of the United States, man. I mean, over there by Howard, even though the campus is insulated, it was rough, man. I mean, you could differentiate between gunshots and a car backfiring, and you learn very quickly. So that's why I say that made me a man, because you go to Howard's campus, I immediately felt at home, right? Like, oh man, okay, there are suburban kids here. There are kids from New York. There are kids here from Jamaica. Like people, and we all loved each other, right? We're all part of the purpose. But then I'm walking home, and look, back then I was about 235 and a little rolled up. I'm a little here now. I'm not quite the dude I am right now. So it's pretty much going to take a bullet of 4 of them to get me. But I was respectful to people, right? If I would see an old lady who needed help getting up the stoop with her groceries, that's me. I'm your guy, right? Oh, you need some weeds picked in your little front. I got you. So people would always see this big dude like helping out everyone on the street. So I was good, right? And it was kind of my Midwest nurturing and being grateful for waking up every day, and also learning the ways of the streets and how to kind of meander through that. So, like I said, DC and Howard made me a man before I'd been on campus in that city for a month. And so managing through that the rest of the way and going up, in the school communications, man, our class, our era back then was so loaded, like Frederica Whitfield, who does CNN Weekends, Stan Barrett, co-host of Sports Center on ESPN, Gus Johnson, from Fox. We were all together, man. And that's not including like millions of I was a writer back then, but that's not including there were so many people. So that, Michelle Miller, who's on CBS Morning News, like we were all this kind of friendly competition to one up one another and to push each other. Like we all knew we were going to be good because we got after it.
And when you talk about it, you came around 86. So, and I'm gonna let my guys jump in and see. I went my first CIAA tournament this year in Baltimore. So I went down. So I got to meet a DC legend, Mr. DJ Cool. So I know when you were down in DC, I know you saw this brother walking the streets, and Ray Letman, another guy.
I didn't see him.
That's a guy you didn't want to see. But, everybody say he was real generous. But just looking, like you said, with the culture that you had, you were introduced to that culture. And, you brought a lot of flavor. And a lot of people don't know that, you started off writing with the Miami Herald and also in DC, starting off around that way. And people don't really realize, before you got to the Falcons, you have a lengthy resume. And when you talk about that resume, you look at the Miami Dolphins, the Miami Heat, you covering baseball at a time from down in Miami for the Marlins too. Outside of that, you also were still getting some columns put out in Sports Illustrated. And I know you had some encounters with Mr. Ralph Wiley back in the day too.
Yeah, I didn't write for Sports Illustrated, but I just knew Ralph as part of the culture. One of the great things of being in DC as a student is there were a lot of opportunities, right? So my senior year, I was able to work 20 hours a week at the Washington Post, right? So I'm with David Aldridge, I'm with Tony Kornheiser, I'm with Michael Wilbon, and Ken Denlinger and Sally Jenkins, all these great writers. So I'd be places, and there's Ralph Wiley. And then when I came back, 10 years later to work for the Post, there's those encounters. And when I was covering the NBA down in Miami, just had those encounters with Ralph. So, and we all looked out for each other. Brian Burwell, another RIP, man, just one of my true, just someone who looked out for me, and so that's why when as I've aged and everything, I've got to make sure to do what Burwell and Ralph and Wilbon and David Aldridge and all of these people did for me, Curtis Bunn, what all those guys did for me to make me realize I could do this in a field that is very, very isolating for Black reporters, because there's very few of us in the game and even fewer, making managerial types of decisions. I've never had a Black boss, man. I have never had a Black boss my entire career. I'm 57 years old. I've never had a Black boss.
And you don't look at day 57. You just got the hair. Definitely, you still look like you can get out there.
Hey, we did the chronology. I told you I got to Howard in '86, and that was 2 years after being at Missouri. I finished high school when Madonna was new.
You know what? I bet not say. I bet not say nothing. My mama might beat me because she's watching the show right now.
Yes, she will.
Keep quiet.
Yeah.
But go ahead, guys. I'm not gonna hog up the floor. We'll get back in rotation because we're gonna talk Falcons and a few other things too. But we
Fire
really
away, man.
Coach,
All right, Mr. C. Wish, Mr. Wyche, again, it's a humbling experience to be able to speak to you. Like myself, my first love was baseball. So I started off as a third baseman and moved to left field. Where did you start as far as in baseball, and what made you transition from baseball to the gridiron to play football?
Yeah, so baseball is probably one of my best sports. I mean, I started out when I was 9 years old, didn't know what I was doing. So they would stash me in the outfield, because I was fast, and I had a huge arm. Eventually got really good. I played on very, very good teams. We would play 50 games a summer, and we were always one of the best teams in the state, as youth. We were really good. So I was fortunate, had a great coach, great teammates, but I was mainly a pitcher. I was a pitcher in baseball, and then was 10 years old in football after playing running back my first year. I had a coach say, "Have you ever tried playing quarterback?" I was like, "No," and he put me at quarterback. It was pretty good. Now I was a baby. Every time I got hit, I would cry. But but that's kind of how it came up. And it didn't really, like, I always play. Even when I got to high school, my freshman year of high school, it was football, basketball, and baseball. And then I got really mad at the basketball program because all the youth league teams I played on, we were really good. My dad coached us, and we were killing teams. You had to play in 2 or 3 different leagues to find good competition. And got to my freshman year, when we would get out and run, we were Jerry Tarkanian, man. We were the running rebels. And when I was in youth league, we'd catch the ball, we were gone. High school I went to, they didn't have the athletes to quite do that. So we'd catch the ball and slow it down and walk it up the floor. And I'm furious. I just hated the style. So I stopped playing basketball my sophomore year. So I was just baseball and football. And like I said, I was quarterback all the way up to partially to my junior year. But I damaged my arm my sophomore year. Going up in Missouri, sometimes playing baseball in the spring, it's 35 and 40 degrees and you're playing games. So I tore apart my shoulder back when rotator cuff surgery would take you out for a season. So I never had the surgery. Was able to fight through it. But one of the other reasons why I also got parked on the bench, got reassigned football-wise, was I re-aggravated a shoulder injury. And so they put me on a defensive line where I never played before in my life, and it ended up being the best thing to happen to me football wise. I started to grow as well. I wasn't big size by the time I graduated, but I was bigger than most of the people on the field.
Okay, and then last question for me before I pass it down to Graybeard. What are some of your fondest memories playing at Missouri or Mizzou before you transferred over to Howard?
Well, I never saw the field. I was redshirted, and then I was just a bench warmer. But I mean, the best memories. Look, I was there when Barry Sanders was sitting behind Thurman Thomas at Oklahoma State on teams being coached by Jimmy Johnson. When Brian Bosworth, and Tony Casillas, and Kevin Murphy, and all these guys were playing for Oklahoma. Troy Aikman was playing for Oklahoma before he went to UCLA. So, like, I had a front row seat to see some of the baddest cats who ever play the game. And sometimes I'm sitting at the field watching our running backs get whooped up on, like, oh, God, like, this is real. I got to live in the weight room a little bit more. But, I mean, it was that. And like anybody will tell you, it's just the friendships you make. Like I said, I still talk. My roommate, Eric Sims from Chicago, we talk all the time. I mean, so many of my guys, we talk all the time. They come out and visit me in LA, or if I'm ever back around, I try and catch up with some of these guys in Chicago and other places. So, that was the best part. I enjoyed my time there. I didn't really enjoy the school. I was trying to get in journalism school there. That was very difficult. But I'm just glad I went to Howard University, as I say. Other than marrying my wife, it was the best decision I ever made.
And you mentioned Willie Jeffries, South Carolina State coach.
Yep.
before I let Gray Bear take over. So for those who don't know who Willie Jeffries is, he's the first African-American coach to coach at a D1 school.
At Wichita State.
Wichita State, which is a basketball school. Now, you know, he ended up taking Wichita State to a bowl game, but Willie Jeffries got his fame at South Carolina State. And then he went over to Howard and brought that magic over to Howard University and back to South Carolina State.
Won MEAC championships when I was there.
Well, Coach Bill Hayes made sure he wanted me to make sure. He said, make sure you let Steve know when he's on that show, let him know that they were wimps compared to what we had at Winston-Salem State. That was what he wanted me to make sure he let you know.
I mean, when?
I know.
What is he talking?
Hold on. He won 2, but it wasn't there. Winston-Salem State. It was at A&T.
He won 2 at A&T when he had Connell Maynard playing quarterback for him.
He just said
they were dudes then.
Yeah, they were dudes then. Anthony Blaylock's been on the show, so I know you got him front row and center when he was at Winston-Salem State. Okay. Shout out to Coach Blaylock, CIAA Hall of Famer. He just made it this year at the CIAA tournament. So he just wanted me to talk a little trash to you know. But hey, all right,
okay. He's a Black College Football Hall of Famer. I'm good. I'll take that. But he can talk trash, talk to me all you want.
I just didn't want to get cussed out. I had to remember that right there because he's watching right now. So shout out to Coach Hayes.
Shout out Coach Hayes. Absolutely.
First and foremost, once again, it is truly an honor to meet you, sir. You covered a very big amount of team throughout the early '90s to almost to the 2000s in Florida, with the hated Florida Gators. Can't stand them. The Miami Heat and the Miami Dolphins. So my question is to you: which team did you enjoy covering the most, or did you just like doing all of them?
I loved doing all of them, but there no doubt it was the Miami Heat. I mean, so this was the era. So I covered the Miami Heat from 97 to 99. And it was a great run because I covered the Gators when Steve Spurrier was there, when he was the first SEC coach throwing the ball all over the yard. When they had Fred Taylor and Ike Hilliard and Jacquez Green and Danny Werfel. And then on the other side, you had Kevin Carter, Mike Peterson. You had all these dudes who played in the NFL. It was crazy, the talent. But when you cover college sports, you're very much at an arm's length from the players. And the NFL, it's kind of that way too, right? You get to be in the locker rooms and stuff with them 3-4 days a week. But when you watch the games, you're up in a press box and, you have to go at certain times. When you're in the NBA, you're around these dudes, right? There's 13 players and 4 or 5 coaches and GMs, guaranteed contracts. So they don't care what they say because they're still getting paid. And you got it for 82 games a year. So you're like a family. And the fact that you play games every, 2 or 3 nights a week, it keeps the content fresh. It's constantly refreshing. But when I covered the Heat, that's when Jordan and the Bulls were rolling. That's when the Orlando Magic had Shaq and Penny. When Detroit had Grant Hill. Like with the East was where it was. Remember those great New York Knicks Miami Heat battles. And then the Heat team, I had all these great characters. I had Alonzo Mourning. I had Dan Marley, Tim Hardaway, Jamal Mashburn. They were so good. Like the Heat was so good, but they couldn't get past the Knicks. And when they did, they had to go lose to MJ and Pippen and all those guys. So I'm sitting on the floor. I'm just around these guys all the time. So the conversations we would have, because back then I was the same age as the guys I was covering. So it was really kind of a cool dynamic. Pat Riley, when he'd get mad at you, he'd let you know. But I didn't cover the team like a fan. Like, right, if they're trying to trade for Latrell Sprewell and they aren't willing to give up their best player, power forward, and PJ Brown, I'm calling the Golden State Warriors and stuff like this. Like they're like they got to give us PJ, and so I'm right. And Pat's getting mad. Like that's not going to help us make the trade. Like I'm not getting paid by you. But for the most time, we had a great relationship. So even when I went to left Miami to go cover the Wizards up in Washington to cover the NBA, there's nothing like covering the NBA just because of the intimacy you have and the relationships you have and the fact that you're around these guys all the time. Nothing is bigger than the NFL. I love covering the NFL because the NFL is king. Like, it's not even close.
Mhm.
But again, the friendships and everything, you know, prime example, and I know I'm going long, but, you know, Michael Jordan, when he played for the Wizards, you know, we had a great relationships because he came in first off as kind of the de facto general manager, as a president of basketball operations. So he had to talk to me about trades and stuff like that. And this is before cell phones. So he's calling me at the house. And, you know, but we had a very good relationship. So this year, here in 2024, when we had to go inform Dwight Freeney, the Colts defensive end, that he was going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I was with Tony Dungy, who was going to be the guy notifying him. Well, Freeney happens to play golf every day with MJ down in Florida. They're best friends. So MJ helped set up the scheme for us to surprise Freeney. So when MJ walks in the door and sees me, it was like we were talking the day before. So it's just weird how everything goes full circle. But that was just kind of a cool moment as well.
So
man, just so much, man. Oh man.
Yeah.
I just got one more question.
Sure, fire
Do
away.
you have any memorable games that you got there and just watched and just all in all in any sport that you covered?
About 10 million of them. I mean, you know, the first Mike Tyson Evander Holyfield fight, when I was sitting ringside when Evander beat him, right? No one thought Evander was going to beat him. Evander was coming up from cruiserweight. No one thought he was going to beat Mike. About 5 of those great Heat Knicks games when they're fighting on the floor up in the Garden when Jeff Van Gundy's hanging on Alonzo Mourning's leg. You know, there were some games at the Georgia Dome and Mike Vick was quarterback, and I mean, he was just must see.
Mutiny.
Must see. You just didn't know what you were going to get, but it was always exciting. You know, one of my favorites was the Saints Vikings NFC Championship game. What was that, 2009 or so, when they were hitting Brett Favre, like when the Saints were hitting Brett Favre, like I was like, how is this dude getting up?
They got robbed out of that game.
Roman Harper I was like, good God. But I mean, there's just been so many. I mean, but in terms of football, probably the most memorable game was the first game back in the Superdome after Katrina, when it was the Falcons and Saints, and U2 comes out and U2's blowing the roof off the dome. The energy was insane. Steve Gleason blocks Michael Kanan's punt.
Please don't remind us.
Never felt any energy like that before in my life. And, you know, the game was lopsided after that, but just, I mean, that was almost like a revival, man. It was like a spiritual deal, knowing what that city had been through and feeling the energy that those folks who never probably thought they'd sit in the Superdome, where there was death in that venue just a year earlier, to come out and give it up like that was something pretty special.
So the question I got for you was, with everything that we got going on, with the change in the front office now, you know, Atlanta finally is going to let Terry Fontenot do his job. Thank God.
You're going to let Terry cook, huh?
Yeah, they go, man, we've been saying this for the longest. Rich McKay need to step out of the way. I'm keeping it professional because I'm in here with you. Because normally we get a little dicey in here when we speak.
But Rich had nothing to do with the personnel. Rich had nothing to do with the personnel.
So here's the question we have for you. When you look at, now you say he has nothing to do with the personnel, so you answered that question for the fans. So all right, and you answered that. So with everything that's compared with the Falcons teams that you covered back in the day to now, what is the different dynamics in the front office right now that you see?
Now, when I covered it, Rich was a general manager. He was the one picking players. Right. So when I covered it, it was Jim Mora was the head coach. Mike Vick was the quarterback, but the roster was really strong. Remember, you had John Abraham and Patrick Kearney. Like, you had really good edge rushers. They haven't had guys like that since. You know, you had Keith Brooking in the middle. You had Warwick Dunn. So the roster was like really strong. Remember, you had Todd Weiner at offensive line, Tyson Clabo. Like, you had like good offense. Todd McClure at center. Like, that was a good, solid football team. They couldn't get past Donovan McNabb in the Eagles, and then that's when the NFC South was really good. Like, every year, it was the Panthers, it was the Bucks, you know, it was the Saints. You couldn't. So, but in terms of the front office, it was very structured with Rich working with the coach. Like Rich was a guy like, I'm going to get the coach the players he wants, right? Oh man, how was Marcus Chaney, one of my old players when I coached out in Lawrenceville, just jumped on. I see him. Okay, when I coached the Lawrenceville Black Knights. But it was, it was different. So then when Thomas Dimitrov came in, right? So Jim Moore gets blown out. They try to hire Bill Parcells, right, to try to come in and run the team. It was going to be Bill Parcells and Jeff Ireland to kind of be in the front office. That didn't work out. Parcells leveraged the Falcons to get down to the Dolphins. They took a swing at Pete Carroll. Pete was like, I'm a West Coast guy. I'm not coming there. And they end up with Mike Smith, who does a great job, right? He has no history with Thomas Dimitrov, but Thomas Dimitrov came highly recommended by Ernie Accorsi, the legendary Giants general manager.
And Baltimore Colts too. Got to remember Baltimore
Colts, yes.
Baltimore and Cleveland too.
Yes, very, very good. He was part of that whole Belichick, Ozzie Newsome crew.
Yep.
And so Thomas comes in with all this analytical perspective. Smitty's an old hard school football guy, and they really would, come in and they worked well together. They drafted Matt Ryan. It was after all the Michael Vick dogfighting stuff. But they have free agent money. They went out and got the Burner Turner. They loaded the team up. Joe Horn, all these dudes. Roddy White came into his own. So the front office structure, again, TD was a little bit more involved with the scouting of the personnel and stuff than Rich McKay was, right? Thomas is a longtime, mainly defensive backs guy for the Patriots. So he loved getting his DBs, and he was hit or miss. He'd get Thomas Deku, who was a diamond in the rough.
Yes.
And he'd get William Moore, who was a hell of a player, but he had injury history, right? Thomas loved drafting dudes with injury history. And so, but they put together solid rosters. And so you didn't have an authoritarian head coach in any of the times I was there clashing with an authoritarian general manager. It was great collaboration, which you're going to have with Raheem and Terry Fontenot. And I think Arthur and Terry had that, but it was more so Arthur was like, I need these players. Like the draft when they had the fourth pick with Kyle Pitts and, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, all those guys. And Arthur was like, I only like Trevor Lawrence. We're not touching any of these other quarterbacks. And so they went with Kyle Pitts, and then the next year, they get Drake London. And so they're like, we're just going to create a team with big receivers and really tough offensive linemen and pound the ball. They neglected a quarterback, man. And you talk to people around the league, and they say what was weird about the Falcons is they bucked what you do with high picks. And you have high picks, you address premium positions, quarterback, and the left tackle who protects the quarterback, and the guys who affect the quarterback, which is an edge rusher and a corner. They never selected those with those high picks. Now people are like, now they had to pay the piper. Because they don't have anybody who can win and get sacks. They got a good corner in A.J. Terrell, but Thomas Dimitrov drafted him. And they don't have a quarterback. But now they do. But we'll see.
You just made me smile because it's somebody that's on our BirdCage crew who is a Kyle Pitts lover. He loves Kyle Pitts. He can't do no wrong. Scoop, better known as the Black Wall Street Journal. Your question has been addressed by a man who understands what went on in this front office. So we passed on the quarterback for, they say that, the other best player in the draft. But, hopefully he has good numbers with Kirk Cousins. But, I kind of had to rub that in a little bit because he's been talking all that trash. And you made my night. You know what? I got a BirdCage shirt that I'm going to have mailed to you just because you did that.
So let me help him out a little bit more because I just spoke to Raheem Morris. I'm still down here in Orlando where the league meeting just wrapped up.
Yes, sir.
And I asked him about that. I said, Raheem, Kyle Pitts has been the enigmatic player. He's got all this talent, but we haven't really seen it consistently put to use. Now, coming from the scheme, Sean McVay didn't use the tight end the way that Kyle Shanahan uses the tight end, right? They both, like Sean McVay uses tight end as an inline blocker, and Tyler Higbee, who would sometimes go out, second or third option. George Kittle would be a different type of inline blocker, second or third option, but a lot of times he's still a priority player. But meanwhile, Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, who runs that system, TJ Hawkinson's that dude, right? So Raheem was like, Kyle Pitts will be a priority player in this offense. So whether that's lining up in line, wherever, the intention as of now here in March is to incorporate Kyle Pitts more than he's been incorporated.
And that was going to be my next question.
I'm fine with that. If you're going to get him at 8, you might as well throw him the ball, and they didn't get it to him. So, we've been hard on him. And when, and we get frustration because some of us play ball or whatnot, just like you. And, guys get tired of running these routes and they're not touching the ball and using their talent.
Yes, they do. And they lose interest.
Exactly. So it was obvious that he lost interest, under the Arthur Smith regime. We all saw that. But getting to it, the next question I got for you is, how do you feel, because we're speaking on the offensive side of the ball, how do you feel about the tampering situation? If you can speak on it, how do you feel that that's going to go with the Falcons when it comes up to this draft? What do you think that we're going to take it? Possibly which direction they're going to lean in at number 8? And lastly, for my other question before I let my other guys take over, who is your favorite person to debate when it comes to NFL Network with teams, with best football teams, or just anything that you're debating on television? So those are 3 questions. So I'm going to let you have it.
So I'm going to start with the last. My favorite person to debate is probably Bucky Brooks. I love Bucky. He knows more football than he gets to showcase. The dude is brilliant. So we love talking Bucky because he like forever, like for the longest, he was like, the Seattle Seahawks got this and that. I'm like, come on, like we used to get after it. But I love talking with Bucky, and of course the co-host of my show, the NFL Report, James Palmer. So in terms of, you said, who do I think they're going to go for at 8?
Which direction do you think they're leaning towards at 8? If they're going to go quarterback, edge, I know you can't spill the beans on.
It's one of the two.
Direction.
It's one of the two. It has to be. It has to be, because you're not going to win in the NFL if you do not have somebody up front who can win, who can beat a double team, who can do that. Now, if you go corner, okay, then you got to have such great coverage, and Raheem Morris is a great secondary coach, that it gives the guys up front time, right? So, they play off of each other. Some teams have great secondary. Legion of Boom, great secondary. And, okay, Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill and those guys, Brandon Mebane, look great. Or maybe it was the other way around, right? We just don't know. But I just think edge rushers are so hard to find. And, when you've got, a Dallas Turner or Jared Verse who's right there. And, again, I just said it. The Falcons have not had that dude since John Abraham and Patrick Kearney. They haven't. It's a void. They got a good corner in A.J. Terrell, right? You want to get another one, if you're really trying to make moves. But, and this is really no shade, but to be honest, they play in a division where Kirk Cousins already automatically comes in and he's the best quarterback. So it's not like he's playing against Brock Purdy and Matthew. You're having to, D up against Brock Purdy and Matthew Stafford and Kyler Murray, or, Jared Goff and Jordan Love every week, right? So I would absolutely, I don't know. I asked for him in the most creative way I can. You'll see the interview coming up one of these days on NFL Network, and he wouldn't take the bait, but he enjoyed the effort. But it will be one of the two, and the value. I would be surprised if they didn't go edge. but that also could be a spot where if these quarterbacks start to move back a little bit, somebody comes up. This draft is going to be interesting because it really is going to start at 4 with Arizona.
Everybody's all on the hometown kid, Dallas Turner. I'm like, look, give me Jared Verse. Them numbers went down after Will Anderson left. No one wants to keep talking about that. You know, he's definitely a great playmaker. No doubts about it. He definitely showed out. But to me, I'll be honest with you. I think the other defensive end that they have at Alabama is that's going to be the guy that's going to be the steal out of those two. That's just my opinion. I want Jared Verse, even though I'm a dog fan. I want Jared Verse because that is a guy that was dominant from day one he stepped on the field, and he's a freak athlete.
He's got great size too.
Exactly. So when you talk about it, no disrespect to Dallas Turner, he's a little light in the behind. He need a couple of more biscuits on his plate. He needs a couple of more biscuits on his plate. I'm sorry. Dwight Freeney was really a unicorn at defensive end when you talk about a guy that was similar in stature like a Dallas Turner. Dwight Freeney was a freak, athletic. And, you know, you add Robert Mathis, Alabama A&M alum, and, you know, shout out to my guy, Scoop. That was his old teammate back in high school up in Atlanta. When you talk about those guys, they were just animals coming off the edge. And Arnold Ebiketie still has not scratched the surface, and he's still learning. And I've been telling my guys, I said, you know, Trey Anderson is a project with the speed, the size, and the aggression that he has. I think that Jerry Gray and company should drop him down as an edge rusher instead of making him a linebacker. Because if you remember, and you were old enough to remember this, Mr. Wyche, when Randy White was playing linebacker for Dallas, and they turned him from a linebacker into a defensive lineman and an edge rusher, and he became one of the best ever. And I think that, and I'm not comparing this young man to Randy White because Randy is just the master was just different. Yeah. But I see the same intangibles, the mean streak, the strength, the speed, and the aggressiveness coming out of this young man, Trey Anderson. He could have that type of effect if they drop him down in the box and actually draft a linebacker and let this kid just go hunt as an edge rusher. That's just what I have, Mr.
Yeah, Wilson. I mean, look, you know, we'll see what they're going to try to scheme up. You know, Raheem's defense is the inside linebackers play a certain role, but I mean, you're in nickel and dime most of the time, and that slot corner is really the kind of key. That's why Jalen Ramsey was such a monster when he was with Raheem in LA. So, you know, that's something to look at too. I mean, we know Alford is there; he's good slot corner, but I wouldn't be surprised if they went that way with a bigger body type, who they could play in nickel and kind of sometimes line him up as a quasi will.
See, and we've talked about this on the show a few times, and I've mentioned two names at cornerback. I'm 10 toes down on him, and that's TJ Tampa out of Iowa State. That is a guy that would fit into the Jerry Gray system, because if anybody knows how Jerry Gray coaches cornerbacks, you look at Pac-Man Jones, you look at so many guys that he's dealt with from Green Bay with Eric Stokes that was out of Georgia. You look at a guy like a TJ Tampa, sure tackler, great in position with the pass. And outside of being great in position with the pass, you also have to look at the fact that he's not afraid to come up and get his nose dirty and go hit a running back. And the other guy is Mr. Drew out of Virginia State. Raw ability.
Good size. Got good size on him.
If I got to compare him to somebody, I'm going to compare him to a corner that you might remember. Physically, he is like Brent Grimes. Like if you watch him physically, he plays exactly like Brent Grimes did with the Falcons.
A little bit bigger than Grimey. Grimey was the most amazing athlete I've ever seen. And that's saying a lot because I've seen a lot. But here's some dude who was like 5'8" out of Shippensburg State. And Emmett Thomas, the Hall of Famer, was like, this guy he's got something to him. He's tough. Again, he's not that big, but whenever they went out there, you know, he had to go out there and play in some games, you know, pretty early in his career. He did kind of a practice squad thing, NFL Europe, and then he was really thrown into it, and teams would test him. I remember against Arizona, it was like they would put Anquan Bolden up against him, and we know what type of player Anquan Bolden was, and Grimey was in him. And it was like, this dude, Like, so, you had to love grinding. But I think Drew's a little bigger body dude, but maybe not, that much bigger, but he's got like some good stuff to
him. And you talk about him coming out of that, that level, and it's so many guys that are coming out of that level that you covered at the Legacy Bowl. One of the guys that I said that I think the Falcons should have took a stab at their quarterback spot, and Arthur Smith refused to probably even look at him, which was Akil Glass. That was a guy that I felt like, he came up under Cornell Maynard. You talk about a guy who could read defenses really well, doing well in the USFL right now, of course. But I really believe that he should have gotten an opportunity to come into Atlanta as an undrafted free agent. And I've been preaching, go get Jeremy Musa as an undrafted free agent if you don't draft him, and bring him into the quarterback room, let him learn. And you got a sleeping giant right there. And you also have, we said we can get in the third or fourth round, possibly Jordan Travis. And the other guy that we've talked about was Michael Pratt out of Tulane. Those guys, I feel like could fit.
A lot of people like him.
He knocked off Caleb Williams in the Cotton Bowl, and that wasn't a fluke that he put those boys on his shoulder. He and Tajay Spears, who I said was a monster, and he's showing out in Tennessee. But I feel like with the system that Zach Robinson runs, you got a guy like a Jordan Travis, a Michael Pratt, or even a Jeremy Musa, or even a Darius Rickers out of North Carolina Central. These guys play in the system very similar to what Zach Robinson does, and I honestly think that they would be good as lower round picks if we don't go after top round quarterbacks.
No, I mean that's what they'll be going to back end quarterback to get that third quarterback. It won't be anybody up high.
But you're right though. So what you guys got for Mr. Wyche?
Go ahead. I went first last time. Go ahead, Glenn.
Mr. Wyche, I got a question. With everything going on with Kirk Cousins and what we're trying to do here in Atlanta and surrounding them, could you just let the people, because the people, when we first got Kirk Cousins, they was like, we got Kirk Cousins. We got Kirk Cousins. But other people were looking at Kirk Cousins on the upside. You got a guy that pretty much was a monster in the regular season. I mean, before he tore his Achilles and whatnot, that man was on pace to make record number. He probably could have thrown for like 4,000 yards. He had 18. He had like 18 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He was top 3 in QBR. He was doing everything right until that injury right now. Could you just let the people know that I think Raheem Moore made the correct decision, because people wanted Justin Fields, but they didn't really.
The NFL told you what it thinks of Justin Fields for him to get traded for a 2025 late round draft pick. So I mean, I get the affinity for the hometown kid, but the NFL told you what they think about Justin Fields. So and that's, look, hopefully he can go up to Pittsburgh. I think he'll end up starting by the end of the regular season and resurrect himself and do his thing. But again, remember, Arthur Smith did not want no parts of him when he could have drafted him. So that's going to be interesting. But in terms of Kirk Cousins, look, Kirk was with Raheem in Washington, right? Raheem was there when they drafted him. There's a lot of those relationships right there. He knows this system. The system is very similar to what he did in Minnesota. So he knows when they're going to get under center. He knows when they're going to be in shotgun. You're going to see more motion out of this Atlanta offense than you've seen in a while, right? You're going to see a lot of that type of stuff because it's very big on getting personnel favored matchups. So, Zach Robinson, what this type of offense didn't have in LA until last year was the run game that they have in Atlanta. So this is going to end up looking more like the 49ers. That stretch zone where they're just going to pound you and pound you and pound you, right? Get some points up on you and then turn their defense loose. See, one of the reasons why I think they've got to get an edge rusher is now they have the potential to have an offense to get up on teams. See, Atlanta has always been, the last couple of years, they've been going toe to toe, right? They've been in a 6-foot square ring banging with teams, 17-16. Now they might be more games where it's 27-24, but if they get that lead, right, and then turn some hounds loose, that's what Kirk Cousins can do for you. That's what he does. He excels with a lead. right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you got that ground game with Algier and Bijan, who can really do some things in behind that offensive line, which is good against the run. So Kirk, look, that was their decision. They had an opportunity to make a play to get up and draft one of these young guys, but I think Arthur Blank is and Terry Fine are like, we've got a roster where if we get a quarterback, we're going to be there, and it's hard not to argue with that, right? They don't have an edge rusher who can win, but they got a D line that sure as hell can win, right? They've got a second level, even though you said Trey Anderson, maybe they move him up. You saw some things with Caden Ellis, and you saw some things with some guys that can do some stuff. They got some guys in the secondary, so. They got skill position guys. So I think Kirk is going to be ready. And I asked Raheem Morris about the Achilles. And he says they think when he reports for those OTAs in a couple weeks, they're going to see, but they think he's going to be ready to rock and roll. I'm sure they'll monitor him, and they're not going to give him a boatload of reps early, but they wouldn't have signed him if they didn't feel good medically.
Agreed. As long as he doesn't get us to the playoffs and fold and bend corners like a 78 Cadillac Eldorado on Front Street. I'm just being honest. As long as he doesn't fold in the playoffs, we good.
Okay, so you're a typical Falcons fan. You're a typical Falcons fan.
I'm joking. I love it.
You are such a typical Falcons fan. Y'all are the most sensitive and demanding at the same time fans. I say that every box of popcorn they give out at freaking Mercedes-Benz should have a tube of diaperine diaper rash for the sensitive Falcons fans. Because here you go, we need to get to the playoffs. We need to win the NFC South. But if we lose, he ain't nothing.
No, I never. Wait a minute. Whoa.
What is it?
When did you ever hear me say that he wasn't nothing? I said I just don't want him folding in the playoffs because he's only got one win in the playoffs, Steve. You can't argue those numbers.
Hold on, brother.
Hold on, brother. You can't argue those numbers. So, I mean, you can say hold on, but it's the truth. But my thing is this. I'm giving him a chance coming into Atlanta. Clean slate coming in. We saw that when he was in Washington, he could sling the ball around, period. Now, I'm a diehard fan. I've been a fan since 91. I don't fold like a cheap paper fan up at Ebenezer Baptist Church. I don't fold. I'm riding, win, lose, or draw.
You went to the ultimate.
Yes, I did. I went to Sweet Auburn Avenue for you. But I'm just being honest, though. I've been a fan since 91. I'm not folding. It's just the fact that we all are hungry for not just a regular good season. We want playoff wins. We want to be able to compete. We want to be able to win championships and put us in a situation to where this city can get a championship. The Braves have already given us a couple. The Atlanta United has given us one. The Hawks right now, that's a whole nother topic. But right now, that's a whole nother
past
topic.
30 years. Lenny Wilkins
Come on, Mr. White.
I want him to tell the truth. That's why we got him in here. He's gonna tell the truth. He's shaming the devil right now and telling the truth, and I love it. But
thank God for Georgia.
Yeah, we got the dogs to at least give us something. But honestly, I see the Falcons actually winning 10 ball games this year.
Yep.
They could have won 10 last year. I'm giving them 10 ball games this year.
I agree with you.
And
I think they give them more than if Desmond Ridder didn't turn the ball over 10 times with the crazy number in the red zone, they would have had 10 wins. They would have had 10 wins, but all the fumbles and everything in the red zone. Like Arthur Smith is not coaching because he can't coach. Arthur Smith is no longer their head coach because he picked the wrong quarterback. Right? They were in position to win a ton of games.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's the bigger issue there. So I think that's where Kirk Cousins kind of takes you over the top. And again, Zach Robinson coming through the system that's been so effective. And each one of these coaches has taken their own little something with it. The McDonald's and Kevin O'Connell's and Zach Taylor's and Sean and Kyle. So I'm going to be interested to see what his twist is because, they don't really have – well, they got Mooney, so they got like the shifty dude, right? But they got the big receivers as well. So I'm very, very interested to see where this goes.
Go ahead, Coach.
Now, see, I'm being nice right now. I love you, Mr. Wyche. I love the trash talk. I love it. That's beautiful. Now, see, I'm being nice and rocking this Howard sweatshirt. I'm about to take it off because you done came in the house and you done just literally. I'm far from a sensitive Falcon fan. If we can live through 28,
Look at him. Look at him right now. It's hitting close to home.
Throwing
It's
it
hitting
out.
close to home, man.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm standing on birdcage business tonight. If we can live through all the disappointments and all the grief that we've lived through
And I agree.
in our lifetime, it's nothing sensitive about a Falcon fan. The only ones that I'm gonna give you this. The only Falcon fans that you can call sensitive are the ones that came after Mike Vick came and they complained about everything.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Think about it. I'll say this: when Matt Ryan was winning and they were complaining about him losing in the playoffs,
I would agree with that.
Complaining about 8 consistent years, and there's never been back-to-back consistent years in the Falcons' history of winning, even with Peachtree Bart.
Yeah.
Even Dewey McClain has come on this show and he talked about that. He said when they finally put an offensive line in front of Steve Barkowski, he said things changed for us. But at the end of the day, he said we went Republican with our play calling in 1980 versus the Dallas Cowboys. Those are words of Dewey McClain, ladies and gentlemen, not mine. I'm putting that out there. So
I would agree with you with that because the people who rode with the Falcons, I mean, that's like riding with the Lions or the Browns, right? In terms of like you just you knew halfway through the season you didn't have a shot, right? You were looking to the draft. Mm-hmm. But the folks who came up, and I say they're so sensitive because remember, I lived in Atlanta for a long time. People didn't care about the Falcons, man. They did not care about the Falcons until Michael Vick came around.
Nope.
And then all of a sudden they're demanding this and that. Then all of a sudden, Matt Ryan comes in and starts winning right away, the burner, this and that. They get expectations up, and then they don't happen. And then people are this and that, like they're Steelers fans or like they're Niners fans, teams that have got trophies in the case.
Yep.
And so I'm like, last time I checked, Cleveland is selling out its stadium still.
Exactly.
Detroit sells out its stadium still. When I watch the Falcons from Los Angeles on my TV, I see a whole lot of red seats dressed up as fans. So that's why I'm saying, like, folks will sit there and call up on talk radio, but they ain't gonna ride with, and I don't blame any fan for not spending money when the team is disappointing. I don't blame any fan with that because I'd probably be that person too. But to sit there and try to come up with every solution and this and that and be all sensitive. The Falcons fans, look, I deal with all 32. I deal with all 32.
I live here in Philly, so unfortunately, I deal with them all the time.
The most sensitive, touchy fan base is the Falcons. And I'm sorry to interrupt the folks on the Perch, but win some games first. Sell out the stadium. Sell out the stadium for 5 consecutive years first. Okay, then you have to ride. Lions fans, Browns fans, y'all, you can talk all day because you ride in bad weather. You ride, but all these other folks, I'm like
Buffalo Bill.
Steve, wait a minute, Steve, say that again because we've been saying this in here for the longest. I have, and you can check many episodes. I have, Cam has, K-Dub, pretty much everybody that's in here has said we give up too many seats. We let people come in our house. I said this here. First off, we're in a Bible Belt country for number one. For number two, it's not hostile enough in Atlanta. Let's keep it real. It is not hostile enough. My thing is, I want fans that's going to throw soda, that's going to cuss at folks like you got up here in Philly. Now,
bro.
About it. Now, I'm going to tell you how crazy this was. So, in 2016, I got to meet Miss Pam Oliver. The wig was lovely that day. Love Miss Pam Oliver. That's my girl there. But I was in uniform. We were holding the flag. So I got to see the Falcons and the Eagles play in 2016. The game we got robbed out of because Keanu Neal knocked out Jordan Matthews for targeting. Bad call. But we were there. There was a Falcons fan in the stadium. Now, the reputation for Philly fans. They fight any and everything. It does not matter.
They fight
and they ruthless. The dude was sitting there with his head down. I'm in uniform. Now they're cheering for me, but they, I said, don't worry about it. I'm gonna talk trash for you and me. And I said, F this, I was going in. I was using my sailor terminology out on the field with some of those fans. But again, I'm standing 10 toes down no matter where I'm at. I'm here in Philly. I live here from Atlanta. But my thing is I'm always gonna wear my Falcon stuff. my brave stuff, and I'm talking smack right along with the best of them. Win, lose, or draw. There is no such thing as hiding. You can't be a fan and just show up when teams win. You have to be there when we are losing. We've been losing for almost 50 some years, and we've only had a couple of winning seasons out of 60 some years. Seriously. And if you can't stand 10 toes down with the team, don't jump on it when they start winning, because we know people laughed at us as Bulldog fans for years when Georgia was getting thumped by those Gator teams that you talked about. I lived in Jacksonville at that time. So I was in the midst of enemy territory, still wearing Bulldog stuff and dealing with that stuff. So my thing is, we've still got to have, as you said, we got to sell out games. You heard it from an NFL analyst, Mr. Steve Wyche. He literally said, we got to pack the stadium. Win, lose, or draw. Don't get up out your seats, look at the TVs, focus on the game. Start cheering for these boys, because Fulton County Stadium used to be rough back when I was a kid coming up, and the Georgia Dome was rocking. But now we have a palisade of a stadium now. No one watches the game anymore, except for the fans of other teams. It's sad. It's sad. Winning cures all, but it's sad because fans won't even show up to the games. Oh man, I don't want to watch them lose. Like, man, we're inside. We're not even outside. You know what I'm saying?
But here's the other thing. The empty seats are a different thing, because like I live in Los Angeles, right? So they did not have football in LA for 2 decades. So you have a lot of fans there who are Niner fans, Seahawks fans, Raiders fans. So when you go to a Rams game or a Chargers game, it's half opposing fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's full. And what that does to the players is, okay, like the Chargers, the Chargers always say is, we got 17 road games. So they go in with that mentality, right? The Rams are like, okay, this and that. We play some games, we're going to be all Rams fans. Some games going to be a lot of Niners fans in there. But they use it because it's a full stadium. The apathy, and I don't know if I would spend my hard-earned dollars to support a club that hasn't shown what it's willing to do to win ball games, even though I think Arthur Blank has shown that he's willing to do to win ball games.
Okay.
But, to sit there and to be all armchair Monday morning quarterback on talk radio, that's the issue. That's what I'm saying. The sensitivity is like, y'all got all the answers right now, but where are you? That's where I differentiate. Like I said, I cover all 32, and some markets, no matter what. You go to Pittsburgh, you go to Detroit, you go to those Rust Belt. They're in. They ride. You go to Seattle, they ride. You go to the freaking Niners. You go to Levi's, they ride. Now they've won.
Yep.
Right. But at the same time, it's a different vibe. Like I said, they got rights to complain. Like some of these squads got rights to complain. Falcons fans, like, you got to stand up. I mean, and it's hard because you got UGA, it's SEC football country, and people love college football there. Right? People love football, and college football. Penn State ain't too far from Pittsburgh, right? Ohio State ain't too far from Cleveland. Michigan ain't too far from Detroit. So Notre Dame ain't too far from Chicago, and Soldier Field's usually pretty packed too. So and they haven't had much to cheer about in a long time either. So anyway, let's move on. Let's stop banging on the fans. Let's move on.
No. We're happy to have you speaking out on this, because we've been saying this for the longest. Now we have somebody with credibility, clout, and that is a steady resource to actually validate everything that we've been saying in here. Thank you. We appreciate this.
There you go.
So the next question I got for you is this. Now, you covered the Falcons during the time of Michael Vick, and I'm gonna get to the time you covered the Falcons, because we've talked about everything else. Let's talk about this Vick team that was around during that time. And you watched the change with Dan Reeves bringing him in, and you got to see the type of player he started off as and he evolved to become. Now, if we would have had a decent quarterback coach at that time to actually get on him, and possibly, a quarterback coach that really, really cared to get him into the playbook, because he even admitted that he didn't read the playbooks. If you had him studying as hard as he did when he came to Philadelphia, do you think Michael Vick could have gotten the Falcons a Super Bowl with the Vic that we saw in Philadelphia with his athletic ability that we had here in Atlanta?
First off, I think it is a very unfair mischaracterization. Say he had a quarterback coach who didn't care. Greg Knapp was a hell of a coach and a hell of a man, and he couldn't handle what Michael Vick did when he went home. If those coaches could have handled what he did when he went home, he wouldn't have got trouble for dogfighting. Okay, so that's on Michael Vick, and Michael owns that. He wears it, and I love Mike and the man he's become, and me and Mike are very close. So to say that he didn't have coaches that cared about him is an unfair characterization. They cared very deeply about him. They tried everything they could to get him going. Trust me on that. Okay, so that's on him. But had he possibly been more committed? Sure. There were just some things that one side of the ball or another, they didn't. It got to a point where they just couldn't put both halves together. And then, you also had the great Philly team when Atlanta went up there to the NFC Championship game, and Donovan McNabb and those guys, they were good, with Westbrook and those guys. It's tough to win. But if Michael could have continued on that track, possibly. But then, that's when Jim Mora started talking about taking the job at University of Washington, right? So there were all of these little things that popped up that Mike wasn't as dedicated. You had the number 1 rushing offense, but the number 32 passing offense, right? And so you had games I'll never forget when they played the Carolina Panthers. And Chris Wenke, like the third string quarterback, had to play, and they were lining up in the original Wildcat with D'Angelo Williams, and they're playing nickel. They're running 8 times. They get 8 first downs. Like they were tipping their hand. So there was always something like that, just to create a little hiccup, to create a little dissension as to where they couldn't close the deal. But you never know, to sit there and say they could have got to Super Bowl. But boy, Mike sure had the talent, and they sure had some players as to where we saw the one year that they almost got there. I think that thing's been a little bit more steady all the way around. They had opportunities.
That was my senior year in high school, and that was tough. I'm not even gonna lie to you, that was tough. Tore up my knee that year, and we lose. That was a rough year. My mom had to console me. She's watching right now, so shout out to my mother, man. But no, I appreciate you answering that question, because there's been a lot of people that have been wanting to know that, because that's been a general statement. Now, we know Greg Knapp was definitely a great coordinator, rest in peace. And, one of the guys who, as you said before, great offensive mind. The question is now, with the new franchise the new regime that we have now, with KJ Black being there, Zach Robinson and these guys offensively.
Doug Williams, DJ Williams. I mean, they've got a loaded staff. They've got a loaded staff. Their staff is loaded.
So here's the question I got for you. Now, we're loaded offensively because they went into free agency and got a lot of great players. Defensively, with Jerry Gray and his knowledge, and you bringing in an energetic guy like Jimmy Lake, who has a great relationship with Raheem Morris or whatnot, do you think that Jimmy Lake is actually, even though he's a very intelligent man defensively, how much do you think he's going to lean on Jerry Gray's knowledge and seniority and experience that he had, not only as a coach, but also as a player, to be able to understand what these young guys are going through, and him being able to relate to this new team? Because it seems like it was a smart move to keep a familiar face in that building.
Well, you better lean on him a lot when you've got one of the best and most respected dudes in the game, and you don't lean on him, then that's a fault. Plus you got Raheem Morris there. So yeah, I mean, you hope Jimmy would it'll be collaborative and they can put it all together. Coaching defense in the NFL these days is hard, man.
Can't tackle nobody no more. They just changed the rule.
I mean,
flag football.
That is what it is, but I mean, guys have adjusted. But I mean, it's just, we saw last year the defense finally caught up. Scoring was down. I think a lot of that was because so many backup quarterbacks were playing. But there's just some of the ways these guys can scheme up, like what Mike McDaniel does down in Miami. again, what Shanahan does, what Houston came in and did with Bobby Slowick, another disciple of this system.
Sheesh.
A lot just goes to leadership and developing confidence and having the right guys in your locker room. And I do think the Falcons have the right dudes in that locker room. We can say whatever we want about Arthur Smith. Him and Terry put a certain type of guy in that locker room. Talent, tough, loves football. It's cliched, but I think that locker room is filled with that. And now I think that they got a quarterback that they taste a little bit of success, because some of these guys, all they know is losing. So they taste a little bit of that success. You never know where that can take you. I mean, we all know that the tasting positivity and building one rung of the ladder a week, how much that can make us feel better. And so that's what I think they need to really build on right now, because it is a fragile existence in the NFL.
I agree.
All right, I got about 10 more minutes for you guys. Sorry
Go
about
ahead.
that.
No, you're fine. You've given us a lot. We appreciate it.
So I have two more questions. So with Kirk Cousins, we all know that he has a 1-4 playoff record. We all know that the 2 losses that he had in Washington, he wasn't quite ready to be the guy to lead a team. And then the additional 2 that he lost in Minnesota, we know that he had the 26th ranked defense that gave up some points, especially in games where he led them to 3-score leads. With the way our defense is presently constructed, because our secondary outplayed the front end most of last season, bringing in a Charlie Warner, do you feel that this offense is going to be set to put up more points and carry the load, or do you feel it's going to be more of a balanced attack where the defense is going to be able to pin back their ears and go after the quarterback?
It'll be more balanced. The offense is going to put up points, but there's so very few cases in the NFL where you win games by double digits, right? The Ravens did it last. The Ravens blew so many teams out last year; it was mind-boggling. But it'll be more balanced, because if it goes to script, so to speak, they get the lead and then they're running the ball with Algier and Bijan for good chunks of the second half, even though OCs just can't stop throwing the ball for some reason. That's just the nature of the game. But I like what you said about the secondary playing. I mean, Jesse Bates was probably the best free agent pickup in the NFL last year. That safety, Raheem was talking about the talent that they have in the secondary, which again, I think if you can find somebody who can make that quarterback think twice about patting that ball, that makes a big difference. But Kirk Cousins, he will come in and he won't make mistakes. I mean, that's the main thing. Now, you do look at the record in some games against plus 500 opponents. That's where you better have a defense that steps up, and you better have a defense that takes the ball away. I mean, defense nowadays, forget the yards per game. It is all red zone and takeaways, right? That is what gets you. You look at the Eagles this year; they didn't take the ball away, and that led to some of their issues. Like, you look at the teams that are in the Super Bowls, they take the ball away. So I think that's something they've got to improve on. And again, when you got the quarterback, if he has to look out the corner of his eye to see if someone's hunting his head, that changes the accuracy a little bit, or the timing a little bit.
Okay, my final question for you is more of a personal question. Like you were saying, that you had some colleagues that kind of pushed you further to the level of greatness that you're currently having. And I'm kind of doing that for my baby brother here, Mr. Historian. I've told him that he has a gift. He's very talented in the way that he's able to paint a picture for a lot of our viewers. He's a historian for the reason that he's able to bring points of views from older days, and he's able to intertwine it with the current state of the NFL and other things. This is a small platform before he gets to where he's really supposed to go. is there any knowledge that you can bestow on him to kind of push him further than just, the podcast that we currently have? Because I feel like this is just the first stepping stone for him before he gets to that next level of where he's truly supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, and salute to you, man. I mean, that's big for you to be looking out, into asking that question in this type of forum. So, there's a couple key things now. Now he's got it. You can sit right here in a studio and sound is brilliant and this and that, but if players and coaches and things like that don't know who you are, it's hard for you to kind of get into the field, so to speak. So, you said you live in Philly. So now you need to reach out to the Eagles and the Sixers or to Villanova, and Drexel and those schools to say, hey, look, I've got this thing going. These are how many viewers I get on the weekly, whatever. Can I get credentialed to come to your media day? Can I do all this? So you can see how the operation works, right? We can sit here and we could throw bombs at Falcons fans and we could throw bombs at decisions that Rich McKay did. But until you see how the whole thing operates and to get a feeling, okay, I get this. Now I understand how this is. That's when you start to make headway. So again, I would check out the metrics of everything, you have going on with this podcast and go to the Sixers or go to whomever in the Falcons. If you're ever in Atlanta, hey, look, holler at me and I'll be like, hey man, give this guy a shot. Let him come to a game. Let him get in the press box. Let him get post-game access so he can see how people have to work a locker room. Because it's easy to work a locker room after a win. It ain't easy after a loss, right? So, to see how those dynamics work, how you can sit up and, we can sit here on the perch and talk ish about this or that or throw flowers on this and that. But when you got to look at that person face to face, how are you going to handle it? Right. So those are the things. And you clearly have the stuff, right? But human interaction is 98% of how we work this. How are you going to handle your boss, right? How are you going to handle some dude who doesn't look like any of us right here and knows nothing but growing up in a certain type of environment? And he says something where you want to say something back, but then you got to pay your mortgage, right? So there's those dynamics that, you need to help. Because this industry is very subjective. But, you clearly have the stuff. And, for you, Coach Cam, to sit there and say that and be on the lookout, man, that's awesome, man. That's like straight up brotherhood right there.
Yeah, that's my big brother. And I call him my big brother. We've been, and everybody that's in the back, that's my other family too.
Good.
But like you were saying about that, being in the U.S. Coast Guard, it's only 5.7% African American. People don't know that. It's not that many of us in there. So when you talk about having to bite your tongue and having to swallow your pride sometimes, I'm not worried about doing it because I had to do it to keep my DD-214 clear. So I definitely understand what you mean when you say that, Mr. White.
And we all have to do it. I mean, it's nothing new. It's the existence of how we are. We have to navigate.
So I definitely appreciate you coming on to the show for us tonight and talking a little Falcons football and checking a sensitive Falcon fan. I definitely appreciate it, man.
Yeah, right.
I got to cut up a little bit, man.
Hey, man. And what's going to happen? People are going to watch this, are going to come for me. I'm just like, you're just proving my point.
It's okay. Like you say, you grew up in Minneapolis. You grew up in my man Morris's Day City. Mr. Morris Day.
I sure did.
Hey, well, you know what? I got my Jerome right there. He just got to pull out the mirror for me one time.
There it is.
So shout out to Mr. Steve Wyche for coming into the BirdCage with us tonight. We definitely appreciate you coming on tonight and spreading some of your knowledge. And like I said, I'll be in touch, Mr. Wyche. I definitely will be.
Appreciate you guys. Anything I can do, man. Bring me back on soon. Bring me back when the Falcons are at the midway point. Let's chop it up.
Yeah,
most definitely.
And let's hope they get about 65,000 people in those seats every game too.
And if they don't, guess what? You got all rights to lay into them like a water moccasin. Go right ahead, sir.
There we go. All right, fellas.
Thank you, Mr. Wyche.
Thank you, sir.
So that was the legendary Steve Wyche coming into the Birdcage. You know, he called us sensitive Falcon fans. It's okay. But you know what? I still stand on it like I told him, you know. Hey, I take it. I don't mind taking a little bit of salt and a little bit of humble pie. But I'm okay. But you know, I ain't gonna sit there and let nobody come in my house like that either, as you saw. So we appreciate the legendary Steve Wyche for coming through, and we have a show for you guys tomorrow. We didn't expect to have a back-to-back show, but as I said, Mr. Wyche hit me up. He said he wanted to come through, so I definitely appreciate him for coming through and you guys for coming through. We got tomorrow, we have former Georgia Bulldog and 1980 national champion and former Denver Broncos tight end who kept Shannon Sharp on the bench until he got hurt, Mr. Clarence K. So if any of y'all are dog fans or any of you guys know about those Broncos teams in the 80s or whatnot, he was that dude. He was tight end you before Brock Bowers. Go back and look at the footage, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to thank Coach Cam Graybeard into the building for coming into the building tonight with the legendary Steve Wyche. So again, we're going to ride this thing out. We're going to sit here. We hope that y'all fill up the stadium because Steve Wyche damn sure let y'all know what it was.
He put us on notice, man.
Yeah, he literally put this on notice. So for everybody that got to see this, you know what it is. But anywho, we have a show coming on tomorrow. As I said, Clarence K is going to be coming. We got a surprise coming for you guys next month. Big surprise. And he was a big name in the Falcons organization. I'll just leave it like that. And recently to the Falcons' success. So it is what it is. We definitely appreciate y'all coming on. Y'all check us out tomorrow night so we can have this thing jumping. So we love you. Y'all stay safe. Be blessed, y'all. Birdcage. We out of here. Peace.